One of the biggest appeals of Yu-Gi-Oh for many fans is being able to play with the cards that we're seeing on the show. However, sometimes the real-life version of the card is lackluster compared to its anime counterpart, due to some changes in the effect in order to balance the card. Some card effects are a bit too absurd for the real-life card game, so some of these cards are chosen based on their real-life utility. So here are top 10 anime cards that were nerfed from the anime to the real-life card game. Starting off the list, we have the Egyptian God cards. Talking about cards that were nerfed from the anime to the TCG, I inevitably have to talk about these cards, and I put them so high on the list because they're such an obvious choice. They're pretty much the poster child for nerf cards. The Egyptian God cards are all cards that had to be downgraded to be printed. Otherwise, even for 3 tributes, they would be one of the most busted cards in the game. In the anime, they were undoubtedly the strongest cards, and once they were summoned, unless you had a strategy against them or a god card of your own, winning would be impossible to achieve. Since their anime effects are pretty long, they had to print different cards to mimic the effects of the anime. The effects they had were pretty jumbled and confusing to say the least. They always seem to have a new ability every time they're summoned. If we go look at sources that detail the anime effects, you can see how much text they would have if they printed the cards with the anime effect. So by comparison, the printed cards are very underwhelming, only having the core effects of the god cards. For example, Slifer gains 1000 attack and defense for every card in your hand, and has the floodgate effect by reducing the attack of your opponent's monsters when they're summoned by 2000, and then destroying them if they reach 0. Then Obelisk has the effect of tributing 2 monsters on your field to destroy all monsters your opponent controls, and for some reason it's the only one that has protection against targeting effects. But the worst one of the bunch, the one that got butchered the most, is probably Ra. It has the effect of paying life points until you have 100, and then it gains attack equal to that amount paid. And it has the other effect of paying 1000 life points to destroy 1 monster on the field. They also share the effect that their normal summon cannot be negated and other cards cannot be activated when normal summon. They really made these iconic cards feel really weak. The anime made them feel unstoppable, but in the real world, you can destroy them with a card like Fisher. Thankfully, they've received support to help them have their anime feel, but you'll have to build your whole deck around them. At number 9, we have Cephalon, the ultimate Time Lord. Cephalon is supposed to be the ace monster of Zone, the final antagonist of 5Ds. However, they changed so much about this card that I don't even think it fits its own archetype, although it might be because it was printed before all the other ones. In any case, Cephalon's real life effect is the following. It cannot be normal summon or set, must be special summon from your hand by having 10 or more monsters in your graveyard, and once per turn you can special summon 1 level 8 or higher fairy monster from your hand or graveyard, but its effects are negated. Also, its attack becomes 4000. I wouldn't say that its effect is that awful, it's pretty generic, but if you compare it to its anime counterpart, you can see how much it lost when it got printed. The anime says that it can only be special summoned by the trap card Infinite Light. Once per turn you can special summon as many Time Lord monsters as possible from anywhere, meaning hand, deck or graveyard, and their attack becomes 4000. Cephalon also gains the combined attack of other Time Lords on the field. It negates the effects of any monster it battles, and if it will be destroyed, you can banish 1 Time Lord you control instead, and you also take 0 battle damage. Now you can see why the real life version is pretty underwhelming. It kinda kept its special summon ability, but it's not fit for Time Lords. The card is almost completely different and doesn't feel like the Time Lord's boss monster at all. The best effect of the anime card is the ability to special summon lots of Time Lords and make their attack 4000, making Cephalon a big attack monster in the process. The other effects the card has in the anime aren't even that overpowered, to be honest, and could easily be printed today. It's a shame that this card was butchered for such a powerful antagonist in 5Ds. Which also leads me to my next card. At number 8, we have Earthbound Immortal Wiracocha Raska, another powerful antagonist in 5Ds whose card has been nerfed. This card used by Rex Goodwin was the best Earthbound Immortal card in the Dark Signer arc. However, for some reason, they transform its powerful anime effect to a hand-ripping one, which might seem good, but let me explain. Like the other Earthbound Immortals, it can attack directly, cannot be targeted for attacks, and would be destroyed without a field spell. Its specific effect is that if it was normal summon, you could target 1 to 3 cards you control, but not more than your opponent has in their hand, shuffle them into the deck, then discard the same number of random cards from your opponent's hand, or as many as possible, and if you do, this card gains 1000 attack for each card discarded by this effect. kinda unplayable. Why would you want to send cards you control to your own deck just to rip cards from your opponent's hand? To be honest, you're making things worse for yourself if you're using that effect. Furthermore, the limit is 3 cards. So you would gain at most 3000 attack and rip 3 cards out of your opponent's hand. But really, it's not really worth it. The anime version of this card has similar effects at first, attacking directly, targeting for attacks, destroy if there's no field spell, etc. But its true power comes from the last 2 effects it has. This card is unaffected by your opponent's spell and trap cards, and once per turn by skipping the battle phase, you can make your opponent's life points become 1. Coincidentally, it also has 1 attack point. Now, the first of the 2 effects isn't anything crazy. A lot of monsters now have that kind of effect, so I do feel like they could have kept that. Now, that second effect, I can understand not wanting to print a card that reduces an opponent's life points to 1, since they could use a burn card to win instantly. However, I do feel like they could have adapted it so it could still feel like a threat. Maybe by having an effect that halves your opponent's life points, perhaps? Well, I don't know, but what we got instead was really such a garbage effect compared to what could have been. At number 7, we have Harpy Lady Phoenix Formation. This anime card used by Mai received a significant nerf when released in the real-life card game, and for good reasons. The effect of the card stated that you could destroy monsters your opponent controls up to the number of Harpy Ladies you controlled, and your opponent lost life points equal to the attack of all the destroyed monsters. However, you could not attack with said Harpy Ladies. It's a destruction effect on top of a burn effect, which is pretty good and can definitely turn the tides around. Now, its real-life counterpart put a bunch of restrictions. First of all, you needed to control at least 3, and the number of monsters you could destroy could not be equal to the amount you controlled. Then the burn effect could only be with the one with the highest attack among the monsters you destroyed, which is fair enough, because you'd be able to burn for a game pretty easily if that weren't the case. Now here's the kicker, you cannot special summon monsters from the main deck or extra deck or conduct your battle phase the turn you activate this effect. Basically, if you're using this card, you need to guarantee that you're winning, otherwise you won't be able to do anything. At number 6, we have Sabathiel, the Philosopher's Stone. This card is definitely very powerful in the anime. It even has a way to search itself within its own effect. However, you do have to use Winged Karibo. When Winged Karibo is destroyed, Sabathiel can be added to your hand. And when you activate this card, you have to pay half your life points, but you'll be able to switch the effect of Sabathiel with a card in your deck or in your graveyard. Furthermore, after resolving the effect, you can add Sabathiel back to your hand. After using it 3 times, it becomes the following effect. This turn, select one face-up monster on the field and multiply its attack by the number of monsters your opponent controls. Needless to say, this effect was completely changed. It just became a fusion support card that searches for a polymerization or a fusion spell card, but you could only activate it when Winged Karibo was in your graveyard. It did have an attack boost that only targeted one monster on the field, and your monster gained that amount. That last effect could only be activated if you had 3 Sabathiel in your graveyard. The second effect of the card is an alright transition from the anime to the TCG, but the first effect completely changes the card. I feel like they could have made the searching effect a bit more generic since you do have to play a Winged Karibo to even use the card, but I completely understand why they made these changes. At number 5, we have number 69, Heraldry Crest. This card used by Tron in the Zexal anime has the powerful effect of copying and sealing monsters' effects. Not only that, but in the Zexal anime, all number cards could not be destroyed by battle except by another number Xyz monster. Now within number 69's effect, it had protection against card effects, so just to destroy that monster, you needed to have your own number Xyz monster with a higher attack than 2600. Now it may seem pretty easy, however, this card is also a walking skill drain for all other monsters, so using any other monster effect on the field was pretty much impossible. On top of all that, like I've mentioned, it can seal monster effects. All the effects the card stole was from your opponent's monster. So if your opponent had powerful monsters on the field and you managed to summon number 69, the chances for your opponent to win were pretty slim. Now let's compare it to the real-life version. The real-life counterpart already is nerfed with only negating the effects of Xyz monsters that are currently on the field, so everything that comes on the field afterwards won't be affected by it, and it can only steal effects from other Xyz monsters too. Also, they seem to have removed any kind of protection this card had, which makes it very vulnerable. They kind of made it an anti-Xyz monster card more than anything. At number 4, we have 100 Eyes Dragon. This card was Kiryu's ace monster when he was Dark Signer. In the anime, it was a Dark Synchro monster that had a very powerful effect. It could gain the effect of all dark monsters in your graveyard, and when this card is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can select one card from your deck and add it to your hand. If the anime effect were printed, it would probably be the best synchro monster ever created, especially since there are a lot of good dark monsters in the game. Not only that, but there is a generic searcher effect for any card in your deck, so obviously they had to downgrade the card. While the card is not that bad, it's a far cry from the anime effect. The real life version says that once per turn you can banish one level 6 or lower dark effect monster from your graveyard. Until the end phase, this card's name becomes the Banished Monsters and replaces this effect with that Banished Monster's original effects. If this card is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, add one Earthbound Immortal monster from your deck to your hand. It definitely kinda fits with the anime effect since Kiryu copies his Infinity monsters in the graveyard. However, you can only use it with level 6 or lower dark monsters, and the Searcher effect just becomes an Earthbound Immortal support card, which feels a bit random to be honest. But yeah, they turned this insanely broken card to a somewhat versatile card, but it really doesn't match what the anime effect had. Now let's proceed to the last 3 cards, and if you made it that far into the video, why not hit the subscribe button? It will help me out. I have a family to feed. At number 3, we have Final Attack Order. This card is an important card in the Yugi vs Kaiba duel during the Battle City arc. The duel was decided a few turns after this card was activated. It has a simple but crazy effect. The first effect that they actually kept in the TCG is that every monster on the field has to be in attack position. It's not a super powerful effect since a lot of other cards can change battle positions. The crazy effect that is missing from this card is the one that makes each player choose 3 cards in their deck to keep and send the rest to the graveyard. This kind of effect is definitely a game ender and probably would have been the best card in the game if they kept this effect. So many decks nowadays are very reliant on their graveyard, so this card would break the game unless they added a restriction on using the graveyard afterwards. It kinda reminds me of the card Last Turn, where the duel will be decided after this card is activated. In any case, this insane card from the anime was converted to a simple card that changes battle positions, so it's definitely one of the biggest downgrades from anime to the real life card game. They already knew that a card like this would break the game. Like imagine drawing this on your first turn, setting it, and then activating on your opponent's turn. You already have your field set up and his turn hasn't even started yet. It's a very funny thought. At number 2, we have Virus Cannon. This is also another card that could definitely not be released with its anime effect. This card was used by Kaiba as part of his Virus cards, a very powerful set of cards for a very powerful person in the Yu-Gi-Oh world. The original Virus Cannon card was a spell card that made your opponent send 10 spell cards from their deck or hand to the graveyard. You could argue that if your opponent plays less than 9 spell cards, then its activation requirements cannot be fulfilled and it becomes a dead card. But let's be real, almost no one plays less than 10 spell cards in their deck, unless they're playing a monster mash deck like Super Heavy Samurai. And as you can see, the real life counterpart is obviously such a downgrade. Virus Cannon in the TCG is a trap card where you tribute any number of monsters except tokens to send a spell card from your opponent's deck to the graveyard. With how the games are today, you could theoretically send up to 7 spell cards by tributing 7 monsters you control, but at that point you're already winning the game and activating this card would be unnecessary. And coming in at number 1 is Card of Sanctity. I think this is undeniably the biggest downgrade in effect from anime to real life. This card in the anime and the manga was described as one of the best drawing spell cards in the game. Why? Well, Card of Sanctity will allow you and your opponent to draw until you have both 6 cards in your hand. In this day and age, cards that allow you to draw 1 or 2 cards are already pretty good. If it's for no cost, it's an excellent card. Potentially going +5 on a single card is pretty insane. Even if it helps your opponent draw cards, technically, if your opponent has more cards than you or already has 6 cards in their hand, then you're the only one that takes full advantage of this card. Imagine activating this card in your first turn after setting your whole field up and your opponent already having 5 cards in their hand. I'd say it's pretty worth it. This card is no doubt one of the best anime cards, even if they don't really use it the way we would use it, to be honest. Now, let's take a look at the printed card. The printed card says, banish all other cards you control and in your hand, minimum 1 from each, Draw until you have 2 cards in your hand. It is a completely different effect. Not only that, but you have to banish at least 2 cards. At most, with this card's effect, you break even. But other than that, you'll always lose card advantage, unless maybe you have cards that activate when they are banished. Stuff like Necroface or the Metafist cards. So yeah, this card was nerfed beyond belief. Like, I don't know why the people in the card art are very happy. There is one card that manages to keep the spirit of the anime. The trap card, the Revived Sky God, allows you to draw until you have 6 cards in your hand by reviving Slifer from your graveyard. It recreates a specific scene in the duel between Yugi and the Pharaoh, so at least there's that. So those were my top 10 Yu-Gi-Oh cards that were nerfed from the anime to the TCG. Now there are a lot of cards that were changed from the anime, so I'm sure there was a lot of other cards that I've missed. Feel free to leave those ones in the comments. It is a shame that to keep balance within this game, the cards you see in the show has to be downgraded, so recreating duels from the anime is not 100% feasible. However, sometimes Konami does print cards that recreate scenes from the anime, which is the closest cards we would get from the show. Alright, thanks for watching the video. Like I've said before, feel free to leave a comment down below and leave a suggestion for any future videos.